A girl with a broken heart's dream was to hear Sweet Child O' Mine live. Nobody thought he would come, but what he did that day changed everything forever. Room number 12 of the Pediatric Cardiology Hospital remained shrouded in silence, barely interrupted by the soft hum of machines monitoring each irregular heartbeat of Emma's heart. At 9 years old, the little girl had spent more time between white walls and the smell of disinfectant than in the parks where she should have been running. Her brown hair, which had once been long and shiny, now fell in thin strands on the pillow. Her green eyes, however, retained a sparkle that no illness had managed to extinguish. Robert, her father, sat in the chair by the window, watching as the evening light painted the light blue curtains orange. He had been a sound engineer in his best years, working at concerts and festivals, surrounded by music and energy. Now, all that world seemed to belong to another life, to another version of himself that existed before the words congenital heart disease became part of his daily vocabulary. Emma was born with a heart malformation that doctors described with complicated terms that Robert memorized without fully understanding. The only thing he knew for certain was that his daughter had fought from day one, surviving 3 surgeries before turning 6. And now, after countless treatments, transfusions, and nights when the heart monitor set off alarms that froze the blood, the doctors had told him the truth no parent wants to hear. We've done everything we can. The waiting list for a transplant was long, too long, and Emma's time was running out. However, Emma never spoke of her death. She didn't mention fear or sadness. Instead, she talked about music. Specifically, she talked about Guns N' Roses. She spoke of Axl Rose the way other children spoke of superheroes or cartoon characters. She had discovered the band by accident one day when Robert played an old record in the car. From that moment, Sweet Child O' Mine became her song. She listened to it on repeat, memorized every word in English even though she didn't fully understand its meaning, and moved her fingers in the air, imitating Slash's famous guitar riff. "When I grow up, I'm going to sing like Axl," she would say with conviction, as if the future were something guaranteed. Robert never had the courage to tell her that perhaps there wouldn't be a "when I grow up." One April afternoon, as the hospital settled into that characteristic quietness of the shift change, Emma looked at her father with those eyes that seemed too wise for her age. "Dad," she said in a soft but firm voice, "if I could ask the universe for something, do you know what it would be?" Robert set down the book he was pretending to read and approached the bed. "What would it be, Princess?" "I'd like to see Axl Rose sing live. Just once. I'd like to be there, feeling the music, like when you tell me about your concerts. I'd like him to know that his music made me strong." Tears gathered in Emma's eyes, but they didn't fall. They never fell. It was as if she had decided long ago that she wasn't going to waste energy crying. Robert felt something break inside his chest. He wanted to promise her the world, but how could he promise something impossible? Axl Rose was a legend, an unreachable figure, someone who lived in a completely different reality from theirs. There were no scheduled tours, no concerts nearby, and even if there were, Emma couldn't leave the hospital. Her heart could barely keep her alive at rest, much less endure the excitement and exertion of a concert. "I'll do what I can, my love," was all he could say. And Emma, as always, smiled as if that were enough. That night, after Emma fell asleep with her headphones on listening to her favorite song for the umpteenth time, Robert stared at the hospital room ceiling. The desperation he had been containing for months finally caught up with him. He took out his phone and began to write. He didn't know exactly who to write to, but he knew he had to do something. He wrote about Emma. He wrote about her love for music, about how Sweet Child O' Mine had been her battle anthem during every painful procedure, every difficult night, every small victory. He wrote about the courage of a girl who had never given up, even when her own heart seemed determined to betray her. He wrote about his daughter's impossible dream and how he would give anything to make it come true. When he finished, he looked at the words on the screen. They sounded desperate, perhaps pathetic, but they were true. Every word was a piece of his shattered soul begging for a miracle. He posted the message on social media, tagged accounts related to Guns N' Roses, with Axl Rose, with anything that might have even the slightest connection. He didn't expect a response. He just needed to do something, anything, to feel like he hadn't given up. Days passed without change. Robert's post got a few likes from friends and family, words of encouragement that, though well-intentioned, didn't change anything. Emma remained in that bed, her heart kept failing, and the world kept spinning indifferent to their pain. But then, something began to happen. A user with several thousand followers shared Emma's story. Someone else picked it up, and then another person, and another. Like a wave that starts small but grows with each impulse, Emma's story began to spread across the internet. Guns N' Roses fans from all over the world started sharing the post, adding their own stories about how the band's music had helped them in difficult times. Some tagged band members directly, others wrote direct messages, even though they knew they probably would never be read. If you're enjoying this story and want to know what happened next, leave me a comment telling me which song gives you strength in difficult times. Robert didn't realize what was happening until a nurse named Patricia entered the room one morning with a strange expression on her face. "Mr. Martinez," she said almost breathlessly, "I think you should see this." She showed him her phone. Robert's post had been shared more than 50,000 times. Minor celebrities, local musicians, even some journalists were talking about Emma. The hashtag Emma's Last Wish was beginning to go viral. Robert's heart raced, but he tried not to get his hopes up too much. Going viral was one thing, but that didn't mean Axl Rose was going to see it. The man was notoriously private, unpredictable. He wasn't one to make public appearances unless it was strictly on his terms. However, somewhere in Los Angeles, in a mansion overlooking the hills, Axl Rose's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. His manager, Beta, an Argentine woman who had been with him for decades, entered his studio with determination. Axl was working on some tracks, lost in his musical world, but Beta wasn't one to beat around the bush. "You need to see this now," she said without preamble, placing a tablet in front of him. Axl, slightly annoyed by the interruption, was about to protest, but something in Beta's expression stopped him. He took the tablet and began to read. He read about Emma, about her broken heart, about Sweet Child O' Mine, about how she sang the song even when it was hard to breathe. He read about a desperate father and a brave girl who just wanted to feel the music one more time before her time ran out. Axl Rose, the man known for his volatile temper, his impossible demands, his relentless perfectionism, fell silent. His fingers scrolled through the screen, reading comment after comment from fans begging him to do something. When he finished reading, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Where is she?" he finally asked. "At St. Mary General Hospital, about 2 hours from here," Beta responded, having already researched all the details. Axl nodded slowly. "Cancel whatever I have tomorrow." Beta smiled. She knew that look. Already did. The next day, Robert was reading Emma one of her favorite books when his phone began vibrating insistently. It was an unknown number. Normally, he didn't answer calls from numbers he didn't know, but something told him this time he should. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Martinez, this is Beta Lebeus. I work with Axl Rose. I need you to confirm the exact address of the hospital." Robert almost dropped the phone. His mind refused to process the words he had just heard. "Excuse me?" was all he could articulate. "Axl is on his way. He'll arrive in approximately 1 hour. We need to coordinate with the hospital to make sure everything is ready. Can you help me with that?" Tears began to run down Robert's face before he could stop them. "Is this for real? Is he really coming?" "Very real, Mr. Martinez. And he wants it to be a surprise for Emma, if possible." The next hour was controlled chaos. The hospital director was informed. Nurses rushed to make sure Emma's room was presentable. A small security team arrived discreetly to coordinate access. Robert, trembling with excitement and nerves, had to make up excuses to keep Emma distracted, which wasn't easy considering his daughter was incredibly perceptive. "Why is everyone acting weird?" Emma asked suspiciously, noticing the unusual coming and going outside her room. "I think there's an inspection or something," Robert lied awkwardly. "You know how these things are in hospitals." Emma didn't seem convinced, but she was too tired to insist. Her heart had been particularly irregular that day, and doctors had increased her medication to keep her stable. She closed her eyes, resting, with her headphones hanging from her neck. And then it happened. The door to the room opened gently. Robert turned around and his breath stopped. There stood Axl Rose, dressed in black jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a leather jacket. Without stage makeup, without production, without lights, he was simply a man in his 50s with surprisingly kind eyes. He carried an acoustic guitar in his hand. Behind him, Slash entered silently, his characteristic top hat on his head and that calm smile that had captivated millions. They hadn't come alone. They had brought the magic with them. Emma, who had opened her eyes upon hearing the door, remained completely still. Her eyes opened wide. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise. For a moment, Robert feared her heart couldn't withstand the excitement. But then he saw something beautiful, his daughter's face lighting up with a pure happiness he hadn't seen in years. "Emma," Axl said with that unmistakable voice, slowly approaching the bed. "I heard you're a fan of a particular song." Emma couldn't speak. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, but her smile was so wide it seemed impossible. She nodded frantically, bringing her hands to her mouth to contain a sob of joy. Axl sat in the chair next to the bed, placing the guitar on his lap. Slash positioned himself nearby, taking out his own guitar with that casual movement that only years of practice can give. Axl continued, "How about we play it together? You and me, here now, just for you." Emma managed to find her voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. "Really? Really, little one. But I have one condition. You have to sing with me, deal?" Emma nodded so hard Robert feared she'd get dizzy. Axl smiled, that genuine smile he rarely showed in public, and looked at Slash. "Ready, brother?" Slash simply nodded, and his fingers began to slide over the strings. The opening riff of "Sweet Child O' Mine," that iconic riff that has made generations cry, filled the small hospital room. There were no amplifiers, no effects, just the pure sound of the acoustic guitar, and it was perfect. Axl began to sing, but not with the aggressive intensity of concerts. He sang softly, intimately, as if sharing a secret. And when he reached the chorus, he paused and pointed to Emma. With a trembling but clear voice, Emma sang, "Sweet child o' mine, sweet love of mine." The nurses who had gathered discreetly outside the room were crying. Robert's face was soaked with tears. Even the musicians seemed moved. Emma's voice was weak, fractured by illness and emotion, but it was the most beautiful thing anyone in that room had ever heard. When the song ended, the silence that followed was sacred. Axl set the guitar aside and moved closer to Emma. "You know what, little one? I've been singing that song for years, thousands of times, but never has it meant as much as it does now. Thank you for reminding me why I do this." Emma, exhausted but radiant, managed to whisper, "Thank you for coming. I don't know how, but I always knew you would." Axl stayed at the hospital for hours. He didn't take photos for social media. He didn't make public statements. He simply stayed, talking with Emma about music, about dreams, about life. He told her stories from the road, about legendary concerts, about moments when he himself had wanted to give up, but music had saved him. He signed his acoustic guitar and gave it to her. "For when you're better and want to learn to play it for real," he said, though they both knew the unspoken truth behind those words. Slash drew his famous logo for Emma on a new t-shirt. He taught her some basic chords on the guitar, guiding her small, weak fingers over the strings. "You have a good ear," he said with genuine impression. "That can't be taught. You're born with that." When it was finally time to leave, Axl leaned in and kissed Emma's forehead. "You're the strongest fighter I've ever met," he whispered. "Much stronger than me. Never forget that." Emma, almost asleep from exhaustion and medication, murmured, "I love you, Axl. Thank you for the music. I love you too, little one. And thank you for reminding me what's important." The following days were strange. The story of Axl's visit leaked, of course. Guns N' Roses fans flooded social media with messages of love and admiration. Some criticized that there were no photos, but others defended the privacy of that sacred moment. Axl never made public comments about it, keeping it as something personal, something that belonged only to Emma and those who were there. Emma lived 3 more weeks after that visit, 3 weeks in which she constantly talked about that day, reliving every detail, every word, every note. The guitar Axl gave her never left her bed. She held it while she slept, as if it were a talisman that could keep the darkness away. In her final days, When speaking became difficult and breathing was a battle her body was losing, Emma still hummed, "Sweet child, oh mine." The nurses heard her through the monitors, that weak but persistent melody that refused to fade. Robert was by her side when Emma finally closed her eyes for the last time. There was no drama, no cinematic scenes, simply one last soft breath, and then silence. But on her face, there was peace, a small, calm smile that said she was leaving satisfied, that she had lived her dream, that she had been seen and loved. Emma's funeral was small, intimate, but in a corner of the room, without announcing himself, without making a fuss, was Axl Rose. He wore a black suit, dark glasses, and remained silent throughout the entire ceremony. When he approached the coffin, he placed a rose on it and whispered something that only Emma, wherever she was, could hear. Afterward, he approached Robert. "She changed something in me," he said simply. "I don't know what exactly, but she did. And I want to do something to make sure her light keeps shining." 2 months later, during a massive concert at Madison Square Garden, Axl Rose did something no one expected. Before playing "Sweet Child, Oh Mine," he approached the microphone. "This song," he told the roaring crowd, "I've sung it millions of times, but recently I sang it with someone very special. A girl named Emma, who taught me more about courage and strength in one afternoon than I learned in my entire life. She's no longer with us, but her spirit is here. This is for you, little Emma." The song that followed was different. Axl sang with a raw emotion the audience hadn't witnessed before. And when he reached the chorus, thousands of voices joined in, singing not just for themselves, but for a 9-year-old girl who loved music until her last breath. Robert, who was in the crowd by personal invitation from the band, cried openly. But they weren't tears only of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of wonder, of the certainty that his daughter had left a mark on the world, that her story mattered, that her love for music had touched even the man who created it. The story of Emma and Axl became legend among Guns N' Roses fans, not because of sensationalism, but because of what it represented, the real connection between art and audience, between musician and fan, between two souls who met at just the right moment. It reminded everyone that behind the giant stages and world tours, music has always been about human connection, about touching lives, about being the light in someone's darkness. Emma didn't live to grow up, to go to concerts, to learn to play the guitar Axl gave her. But she lived fully in the days she had. She lived loved, she lived heard, and she lived knowing that her favorite song, sung by her hero, was just for her. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? To be seen, to be important, to leave a mark however small in this vast universe. Emma achieved it in 9 years, more than many do in a lifetime. If you made it this far and this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that will make you feel. The legendary Axl Rose, walking unnoticed through the streets of Los Angeles, observes a young musician who is about to change his life forever. What happens in the next few minutes defies everything you thought you knew about rock stars. Stay until the end, because this encounter took a turn that nobody saw coming. It was a typical Friday on the Santa Monica Boulevard. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the pavement, while hundreds of people walked hurriedly, absorbed in their phones or conversations. Among the crowd, sitting on a corner near the pier entrance, was Lucas Martinez, a 23-year-old young man with a worn acoustic guitar resting on his knees. His open case in front of him contained barely a few $1 bills and some coins that gleamed faintly under the evening light. Lucas had been playing on that same corner for months. Every day was a constant struggle to capture the attention of passers-by who rushed by at full speed, too busy to stop and listen. But Lucas didn't play out of desperate need. He played because music was the only thing keeping him alive after having lost everything. 6 months ago, he had quit his job at a corporate office, fed up with the monotony and falseness of the environment. His family didn't understand him, his friends abandoned him, and his girlfriend of 5 years left him, telling him he was wasting his life. Now, with barely enough to pay for a shared room in a rundown apartment, Lucas clung to his guitar as if it were his last link to hope. That afternoon, he began playing an acoustic version of "Patience" by Guns N' Roses. His voice, though without professional training, had a raw and honest quality that occasionally made some pedestrians stop briefly before continuing on their way. What Lucas didn't know was that, among the crowd, someone was watching him with unusual attention. A man of medium height, with a black baseball cap pulled down to his eyebrows, dark sunglasses, and a worn denim jacket, had stopped a few meters away. His hands were buried in his jean pockets, and his posture was relaxed, almost invisible among the constant flow of people. The man listened attentively while Lucas finished the song. There was brief applause from a group of passing tourists, and one of them dropped a $5 bill into the case. Lucas smiled shyly, thanked with a nod, and took a sip of water from a half-empty bottle he had beside him. Then, to Lucas's surprise, the man with the cap approached. His steps were confident but not threatening. He stopped in front of Lucas and stood there, observing him in silence for a moment that seemed eternal. "Do you play here a lot?" asked the man with a rough but curious voice. Lucas looked up, squinting against the sun's glare filtering behind the stranger's figure. "Every day," he responded cautiously. "It's my office." The man nodded slowly, as if evaluating the answer. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 12, said Lucas, relaxing a bit at the stranger's friendly tone. "But professionally, well, this is as professional as I've been." The man let out a brief, almost ironic laugh. "Professional," he repeated. "Most people don't understand what that means in music." Lucas didn't know how to respond. There was something about this man's presence that made him feel uncomfortable but also intrigued. The stranger crouched down to Lucas's level, resting one knee on the ground. From that position, he looked directly at the guitar. "It's a Martin," observed the man, pointing at the instrument. "A D28, if I'm not mistaken. A bit beaten up, but it has good sound." Lucas blinked, surprised. Not many people could identify a guitar model just by looking at it. "Yes, it was my grandfather's. He left it to me when he died." The man nodded with respect. "The best guitars always have a story." There was a pause before he added, "You played Patience a while ago. It wasn't bad." "Thanks," said Lucas, not knowing whether to take it as a compliment or veiled criticism. "It's one of my favorites." "Mine too," responded the man with a barely perceptible smile. "But you play it like you're asking permission." "That song isn't for asking permission. It's for demanding to be heard." Lucas frowned, processing the words. Before he could respond, the man stood up and pointed at the guitar. "Will you let me try?" Lucas hesitated. His guitar was the most precious thing he had, but something in the stranger's tone made him nod. Carefully, he handed over the instrument. The man took the guitar with an almost ritual reverence, adjusting the strap over his shoulder as if he had done it millions of times before. And then he began to play. The first chords were soft, almost experimental, but then something changed. The guitar seemed to come alive in his hands, each note flowing with a precision and emotion that left Lucas completely paralyzed. The man played an extended version of Patience, but it wasn't simply a repetition. It was a reinterpretation, a conversation between the musician and the instrument that captured the song's essence in a way Lucas had never heard before. The crowd began to stop. First there were 2 people, then 5, then 10. Within minutes, a semicircle had formed around them. People took out their phones, recording the moment, murmuring to each other with expressions of amazement. Lucas watched everything in disbelief. Who was this guy? How could he make a guitar sound like that? When the song ended, there was a brief silence, followed by deafening applause. The man returned the guitar to Lucas with a modest smile. "Thanks," he said simply. "That was incredible," Lucas managed to say, still processing what he had just witnessed. "Who are you?" The man took off his sunglasses, revealing penetrating eyes that seemed to have lived 1,000 lives. "Someone who also started on the streets," he responded enigmatically. Before Lucas could ask more, a middle-aged woman in the crowd shouted, "Oh my God, it's Axl Rose!" The murmur became a frenzy. People began approaching, shouting, asking for autographs and photos. Lucas felt the world move in slow motion. Axl Rose, the Axl Rose, the rock legend. He had been playing his guitar. Axl raised a hand, trying to calm the crowd. Calm down," he said with a tired but genuine smile. He looked at Lucas and gestured for him to come closer. "Come on." Lucas got up, still dazed, following Axl as he made his way through the people. A black vehicle with tinted windows stopped by the curb, and a burly man in a suit quickly got out, opening the back door. "Get in," said Axl, pointing to the interior of the car. Lucas hesitated. "What? Why?" "Because we need to talk," Axl responded simply. "And we can't do it here." With his heart beating a mile a minute, Lucas got in the vehicle. Axl entered behind him, and the car started smoothly, leaving behind the crowd that continued shouting and taking photos. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with what you think will happen. You won't regret it. Inside the car, the silence was almost deafening. Lucas looked out the window, watching the city pass in a blur of lights and shadows. Finally, he dared to speak. "Why did you bring me here?" Axl leaned back in his seat, taking off his cap and running a hand through his hair. "Because I saw something in you," he said bluntly. "Something most people don't have. Passion, honesty. But I also saw something else. Fear." Lucas swallowed. "I'm not afraid." "You're lying," said Axl with an ironic smile. "You're afraid of yourself, afraid of failing, afraid of succeeding, afraid that if you really try to be what you want to be, life will kick you again." The words hit Lucas like a punch to the stomach. "How do you know that?" "Because I went through the same thing," responded Axl, his tone becoming more serious. "When I was your age, I was on the streets of Los Angeles, sleeping in rehearsal studios, eating whatever I could find. People told me I'd never get anywhere, that I was a dreamer, that I should get a real job." Lucas listened in silence, hanging on every word. "But here's the difference," Axl continued. "I decided that I wasn't going to let fear define me. I decided I was going to fail 1,000 times if necessary, but I was never going to stop trying. And you, Lucas, have to make that same decision." "How do you know my name?" Lucas asked, surprised. Axl pointed to the guitar case that Lucas had brought with him. On the inside of the lid, written in permanent marker, was his name. "Pay attention to details," Axl said with a smile. The car stopped in front of a discreet building in a quieter part of the city. Axl got out first, followed by Lucas, who looked around suspiciously. "Where are we?" "At a recording studio," Axl responded. "One I use from time to time. Come on, I want to show you something." They entered the building, passing through a small lobby until they reached a heavy steel door. Axl opened it, revealing a fully equipped recording studio. The walls were covered with acoustic panels, and in the center of the room was a drum kit, several amplifiers, microphones, and a mixing console that looked like it came from a spaceship. "This is yours for the next 2 hours," said Axl, pointing to the space. "I want you to record something, whatever you want. An original song, a cover, whatever. But it has to be something that comes from your soul, not from your head." Lucas was overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Axl leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Because someone did something similar for me many years ago. A guy named Danny, who let me use his studio when I didn't have a penny. He told me that if I ever made it to something, I had to do the same for someone else. And here we are." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Axl responded. "Just play. And when you're done, we'll talk." With that, Axl left the recording room, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts and his guitar. Lucas looked around, still processing everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. Slowly, he sat in a chair in front of a microphone, tuned his guitar, and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt something he had forgotten: hope. He began playing a melody he had been composing in his head for weeks, but had never dared to finish. The notes flowed naturally, each chord building on the previous one, creating a musical narrative that told his story. The loss, the struggle, the doubt, but also the determination to keep going. On the other side of the glass, in the control room, Axl listened in silence. Beside him was the studio's sound engineer, an older man with decades of experience in the industry. "He has potential," murmured the engineer, adjusting the levels on the console. Axl nodded without taking his eyes off Lucas. "More than that, he has something that can't be taught. He has truth." When Lucas finished playing, there was a heavy silence in the air. He slowly opened his eyes, as if waking from a dream. Axl entered the recording room again, with a serious but satisfied expression. "That was honest," said Axl. That was real. Now let me ask you something. Do you want to keep playing on the streets, or do you want to try something bigger? Lucas looked at him fixedly. I want to try, but I don't know how. Axl pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to him. This is my manager's contact. Tell him I sent you. He'll help you get some contacts, some gigs at small bars to start. I won't lie to you, it's going to be hard. You're going to fail more than you'll succeed. But if you keep showing what I saw today, you have a chance. Lucas took the card with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, said Axl with a smile. Thank me when you're playing on a stage in front of thousands of people. Until then, prove I wasn't wrong. They left the studio together. Outside, the sun had completely set, and the city glowed with the lights of night. Axl shook Lucas's hand firmly. One last thing, he said. Never let anyone tell you your dream is too big. Dreams aren't too big. People are too small. With that, Axl got into the black car waiting for him and disappeared into the night. Lucas stood on the sidewalk, looking at the card in his hand as if it were an invaluable treasure. That night, back in his small room, Lucas couldn't sleep. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day in his mind. It seemed like a dream, but the card on his nightstand was proof that it had all been real. The next morning, Lucas called the number on the card. A professional voice answered on the second ring. Tom Harrison's office. Hello, said Lucas, his voice hesitant. My name is Lucas Martinez. Axl Rose told me to call you. There was a brief pause. Ah, yes. Axl told me about you. Can you come to the office tomorrow at 10? Lucas felt his heart race. Yes, of course. Perfect. I'll send you the address by message. Bring your guitar. The call ended, and Lucas stared at his phone in shock. This was really happening. The following months were a whirlwind. Tom Harrison turned out to be an experienced manager who had worked with dozens of emerging artists. He didn't promise Lucas anything, but he gave him something more valuable, an opportunity. He got Lucas a series of performances at local bars and cafes, small places where he could perfect his art in front of real audiences. At first, it was difficult. There were nights when there were barely 5 people in the audience. There were moments when Lucas questioned if he was doing the right thing. But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered Axl's words. Dreams aren't too big, people are too small. Gradually, things began to change. The crowds grew. People started sharing videos of his performances on social media. A local music blog wrote a glowing review about one of his original songs. And then, 6 months after that encounter in Santa Monica, something unexpected happened. Lucas received a call from Tom. I have news, said the manager with an excited tone. An independent label wants to meet with you. They're interested in recording an EP. Lucas felt his legs weaken. Really? Really? And there's more. Axl asked if you want to open for him at a private show next month. It's a small event, only about 300 people, but they're all industry figures. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yes, of course. On the day of the show, Lucas was more nervous than he had been in his entire life. He arrived at the venue 2 hours early, with his guitar and a mixture of excitement and terror running through his veins. Axl was there, checking the sound equipment. You got here early, said Axl with a smile. That's good, it means you care. I'm terrified, Lucas admitted. That's good too, Axl responded. Fear means this really matters to you. Use it. Channel it into your music. That night, Lucas went on stage in front of an audience of producers, label executives, musicians, and critics. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. But when he started playing, something changed. Fear transformed into energy. Doubt became determination. He played 4 songs, all originals, all coming from the deepest part of his soul. When he finished, the applause was genuine and prolonged. As he came off stage, Axl was waiting with a proud smile. You did it, said Axl, shaking his hand. Now the rest is up to you. Lucas nodded, knowing this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. But for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. If you made it this far and want to keep seeing inspiring stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell.